Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sasse Museum of Art and our monthly discussion with artists. We have another four great artists talking about the Word and Images catalog and the show going on right now at the Sasse Museum of Art. So I'm just going to let them introduce themselves. Why don't we start with Denise?
Sure. I'm Denise. that seems so funny. I'm Denise Weyhrich.
And what kind of art do you do?
Jean told me to keep the answer short. So
don't worry about what I said.
We'll just say I'm a conceptual installation artist, retired graphic designer. So I'm schizo, and whatever the concept is leads the media. So yeah, there you go. So whatever's poking my brain, I just learn new techniques or bring in people with me to teach me how to do it otherwise. So I like interactive installation. So I'll say that. Thank you.
And Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Ossman. I'm thrilled to be a part of this show because besides being trained as a painter and printmaker and also making conceptual installations, I'm also a writer. I'm an anthropologist and I write about anthropology, not necessarily in what you might think of as a quote scientific way. I deal with live people. I do not dig up bones. I do not do archaeology. I'm a cultural anthropologist, so I write about people's stories and I listen to lots of stories, and much of my art is inspired by listening to stories.
Nancy?
I'm Nancy Torbitt-Stewart, and mainly I'm a painter. I have been a printmaker and a ceramist, and it's been fun to be associated with the Sasse Art Museum. I've enjoyed what interactions I've had so far and hope for more. Looking forward to meeting all of you.
Okay. And Cindy.
I am a fiber artist and poet in San Bernardino, which today was gorgeous. Yay. And I love story, myth, texture. I started as a painter, watercolor and acrylics, but I've been doing fiber art for over 30 years now. So this is what stuck. I also do poetry performance, which was on hold a bit. I had to do videos for a while, but it's coming back. It's going to come back. And I make the costumes for it. Happy to be here with all of you.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to be talking with you today. Usually I'm completely out of my element because I'm a writer and not a visual artist, but now we've got words, which is nice. And I thought I'd start with words and talk about, I just wanted to ask you all about the idea of narrative and if that, to what degree that comes into your art, and are the words there to help that, or are you completely resistant to that? And just anybody who wants to go first, that'd be great.
I'll go. I often use words and text in my work. And the first painting I did like that was my now husband, who was somebody that I had just started dating, told me he had a dream about me one night, but he was too embarrassed to tell me what it was. So I asked him to just write it out and give it to me, and he did. And so that was, I used a hot glue gun to write it on the canvas so it had dimension, and that was the very first painting that I did that was text all the way across it. And it was a lovely letter, and I still have that, and it's been like 25, 28 years now, I think. So it was a really good inspiration to start using a lot of text in my work.
Yeah, one of the pieces you have up right now, I find fascinating. I mean, I find them all fascinating, but for that, and it's this image here, which is I believe this is a Semitic writing. Am I correct about that?
Some of it is. It's also got several different languages. That one was the. It's called Every Woman Has a Story, and when I started it, I started to write on this plaster cast about my mother's story. And I realized that her story probably isn't that unusual. And it was mainly how the life of being a mother wasn't really her forte. And she had a lot of sadness in her life, or an unfulfilled life. And so I started putting other languages in there, just the title, Every Woman Has a Story, in several different languages. So it looks pretty asemic because none of it is real clear at this point. And I do sort of enjoy that too.
Thank you. We'll come back to that one maybe. And let's see, Denise, is there a narrative thrust to your work?
Duncan Simcoe's in the exhibit. And one time I had done a solo exhibit at his university, and he looks at me and he goes, "So many words." and because of the typography love and all that, I, for some reason, end up doing a lot of things with transforming newspapers. And so that open-ended, not nebulous, but more flooding with concepts and images and thoughts and voices and different voices became really important to me. I used to have to tell the students, whatever you do, don't use the LA Times because they'll sue you if you incorporate it in any of your artworks. And I'm just fascinated with the window to the world that the newspaper is. And so for me, the documents are part of the narrative, almost flooding in like a really huge orchestra with all these singers and kodo drums in the background, just everything going on, so that you can pick out what parts of it speak to you.
Now, did you choose these newspaper articles specifically, or is there a randomness to it, or?
Well, those are all from the front page. So what I did for that piece, I was just cutting out images from the front page. So basically it was like a really lame kindergarten assignment where they just put the newspaper down and tell you, here's the newspaper, you cut it apart and do something with it, so that was part of it. And with the dictionary, it's really conscientiously using the obituary to celebrate life and to reform it and put it into a printed structure. I like using printed structures as substrates because they come with so much more meaning.
Looking for that dictionary. It's gorgeous.
Denise,
Yes.
I have to tell you that I did move things around in your
Yay!
installation.
Good. Then I have achieved something.
It was a lot of fun. No one else would touch it. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to
man.
play.
It's all about interaction, because the whole thing is about what's going to form your world. What the media says, or the fabric of your life, and those who breathe life into your fibers, and the fact that you played with it is exactly what it's all about. I don't know if it's manifest destiny, but for you to play with it, Cindy, that just makes it rock. Did you take a picture of it and record it?
I didn't. There was a lot going on, but I'm glad I could share with you.
Awesome.
At the moment.
Awesome.
It's a great piece.
Oh, wonderful. And Nancy, I have such respect for you. We've used you, your incredible portrait in that one Seeds exhibit, and Cindy and I fell in love with it at that moment. So
Oh, thank you.
to be with you all is a huge privilege, and I really, really appreciate this moment. Thank you.
It's a good group.
Well, and Cindy, but how about as a poet, narration must be really important, or the narrative must be important to what you're doing.
John, what a lead in, because I felt the best answer was to read a poem that goes with Magnolia Meditation. I am a storyteller. I weave fragments of life together, other stories and myths. And this poem is just a good example. I mean, it's something that really happened next door, but there's other parts to it. And then the fiber art, no, not that one, Magnolia Meditation,
What page is
as
that?
magnolia flowers.
Gene, do you know what page that is?
I don't.
Oh, that's all right.
Which one is it, Denise? Describe it, and I can tell John what page it is.
It's one of
Oh,
Cindy's.
It's
I mean,
got
Cindy, I'm sorry.
magnolias and door. That's it. Right there. Now you had it. You lost it. There it is.
Ah, yeah.
Okay. View next door of destruction. Well, you can even read the poem right there. Mole up curves to a parched saffron surface, then burrows through misty sand, silt, and clay, unwinds, forming a new path. Giant roots anchor each turn. I sigh, shadows hug. A radiant crone appears with long white hair. Stay rooted underground for a while, she says. On a pilgrimage, I follow Mole, yet aware of the elder woman's presence. Time to awaken senses other than sight to nourish my heart. Move beneath the scenes like crawling through tunnels. This southern magnolia, part of an ancient circle, surrounds a tall vertical stone. Listen carefully, and it sings a healing song. The roaring of power saws when people refuse to hear. Tree survived fire, cut down today. Only sawdust left. This tree, I know, went through my neighbor's generation, and then my children grew up, and who knows how old it was. And young people moved in, and it seemed like during COVID, everyone was just chopping down their trees in their yard. They couldn't go anywhere, and they were just chopping down the trees. And I could hear this next door outside my studio. And I knew what was happening without even going outside, and I was just in tears. But I could write a poem and made a tapestry. So some of this is a shamanic journey that I had. Some of it is the experience with the neighbor. And then this is how narrative works with me. Sometimes I do include fragments of the poems in the art.
Are the fragments of the poem in this piece?
Not this one, no.
Okay, but that it tells us, it seems like it's telling your entire relationship with the tree.
Yes, in this magnolia fabric, there's the white flowers, but then there's also like the bottom left, there's like the outline. So it felt like the ghost of what was left. And it's a little hard to see, but in that big gold shape in the bottom, I did hand embroidery of the magnolia roots.
Wow.
And they're very horizontal, actually, which I didn't know.
Huh.
So just really getting to know the tree, but then having to survive in the urban. So there's the doors and the maps. And now the flowers aren't there for the bees. Yeah. So I guess
Okay.
I was thinking my asemic, the writing, oh, I'm not saying that word right. Asemic writing can be in the hand embroidery sometimes. So I have the roots, I have the veins of some of the leaves is expressed that way.
Huh. That's great. And Susan, I know that you have narrative as well, but it's different, right? Because it's almost like a joint narrative, if I understand correctly.
No, not really. The pieces that I have here are my narrative. For instance, the piece called Conclusion, it's actually the conclusion of this book. So the book is an analysis, but that begins with artworks and it ends, instead of writing the conclusion to the book, I actually made the piece. I went
Page
out into
64,
my
John.
studio and I made the piece that is in the catalog. So that's one example. It's a little different than the other ones in the show. But it is very related to a memoir. So the memoir is, yes, there are other people in the memoir because I talk about collaborations that I directed, but this piece is actually really about my story. And I think it goes back also to some of the things that Nancy, I mean, it's got different themes in it, but I think this is a detail of it. You can see it includes several languages. And I think it goes back to what Nancy was saying about languages, but in this case, it's not women's stories, it's actually my languages. And one of the reasons that I found myself both writing in different languages and scripts in the art, but also this kind of practice of what I call almost writing, like what you can't quite say. And sometimes it's from left to right, and sometimes it's from right to left. I don't do up and down languages. That's not part of my repertoire, but it's so there is something about painting that goes beyond what you can say in a story, because a story has a beginning and a middle and an end. Unlike a poem, some poems don't have that kind of a structure. So I feel that in the painting and the artwork, whether it's an installation or a painting or a drawing or anything with the visual arts, you can have these different layers that you can't when you're writing a story. So sometimes it actually feels more accurate to your experience than what you can put down the page, at least what I've been able to get down. So in this case, concluding with this artwork rather than with a conclusion, especially to a life story, it's a way of sort of concluding, but also opening the door to something else. And it's also a way of introducing in this particular book, it was really important for me for the artwork to be a partner to the text, not something that was simply illustrating or subordinate to it, which of course in a book, right? We think a book, it's a certain format. Unless it's a big coffee table art book, it's usually the text that's going to be highlighted. So that particular piece in the show came just purely out of my story and is an actual ending to a version of my story.
Interesting. Would you say this is where story is constructed, this is unconstructed?
I don't know that it's unconstructed, but it shows the book, for instance, this piece I don't know if there's a bigger piece where you show the full piece. This is just a little tiny detail of it, but the full piece, it consists, the structure of it is sort of 3 swirls, if you like. And the book is constructed also in 3 what I call waves. And so there are these 3 sections of the book, and all of them emphasize the movement between art and writing and between scholarship and arts, going beyond the visual arts as well. So there's this feedback and this circular kind of motion in each of them. And so I didn't necessarily do it like sitting down and saying, oh, it's got to be a reflection as a conclusion. But it just happened because I was so into that structure that it actually came out in this piece. When you see the whole piece, you see there are these 3 kind of whirlpools. And then there's something that happens. And there are images of me, which are also very important to the painting. So photos of myself. So it's an autobiographic piece.
That's great. Okay. We had some discussions beforehand, and we had nice long conversations. And I'm just gonna, all the 4 of you, if you'd like to answer any of the questions, that's great. If you don't really feel like answering the question, that's great too. But I just want to start off with the concept of asemic writing, which a couple of you are doing, and maybe we should define asemic writing first. Does anybody feel comfortable doing that?
I view asemic writing as it's a personal writing. It's writing in your own personal language. So you're not actually writing out words that somebody's going to recognize. It's also, to me, a way of adding another design element. You know, I got into it when I started doing printmaking, and I was doing multi-layers, and you know, you want something there and you just freehand it. So it's, to me, it's a gesture.
Mm.
And it may have meaning to me, but it's not necessarily going to have meaning to you.
Mhm.
Anybody want to add to that?
I'm thinking about your image of every woman has a story, and one of the things that's interesting to me about that is it's her own story, but it's not in a language that's for anybody but her. And so the kind of the statement is like, there's nothing wrong with your own personal language. There's nothing wrong with, right? You don't have to be, at least that's what I felt part of the statement was, you don't have to be writing for other people, but you do construct your own story.
Yeah, and that very first one that I did, that was the letter that my husband wrote me, there were parts of it that I really didn't want anybody to be able to read. And so, you know, it became a little more obscure in that, but he knew what it was.
Nice.
Don, could you go to page 44, 45?
Yes.
This is, whoop, went too far.
Oh, that's another wonderful piece.
Yes.
Anyway, this is a piece that Nancy did that we had in the collection early on. I had met her at the LA County Fairplex, an exhibit that she had and or was in, and was fascinated by this piece. And actually, this piece was the what started this whole exhibit coming together.
Mhm.
What inspired you about it, Gene? What was the reaction?
Well, you like to ask difficult questions. It was the story, you know, Lessons Before Dying, the story behind it, and then the letter on the painting itself. And originally, this exhibit was going to be art that had some sort of writing, letters, calligraphy, something in it. But once I started putting it together, that disappeared quickly. But it was this and Lisa Siegel's, some of her pieces, the sculpture she did where she cut up her poems and constructed things. So it's between this and that brought it to the forefront and got me, you know, working on putting it together. And that was last year. And then this is what the exhibit is what came out of it.
That's interesting. Now, Susan, you're not doing the same thing here. You've got several languages going in, but unless someone spoke all those languages or read all those languages that you can read, it's going to be some of the same effect. Are you going for that same sort of effect?
Yes, I mean, I think that it is, I don't usually, occasionally I'll use languages that I don't know, or that I don't know as well, but usually I'm actually writing words when I use the languages. Sometimes I do this thing almost writing, which is not intended to be a language, it's just kind of like scribbling. But when I write, I usually say it. So I'm anticipating that there are going to be different reactions and different people reading it in different ways. Some people will just say, oh, that's the script of that language. Or I think it's, you know, some people might just be curious about it. And other times other people will be able to read specifically and attach to that. So that always happens, right? No matter what we make, somewhat different people are going to read in different things. So that's just, that can be a part of it. In the case of another piece that's in the show here, for instance, the other two pieces, you said, do I sometimes use other people's words? There's a piece called Bibliography, and there's another piece called Cappuccino, and those are both other people's writing, which are, you know, printed words, which are not me writing at all. I'm just copying. The bibliography is the list of all the books that a bunch of scholars in like a residency, like a fellowship residency, they were there for a year in Berlin. And I took the first 6 months from the library and I took every title that they had. Unfortunately, I was unable with my computer program to get non-Latin alphabets. So if things weren't transcribed, like let's say if it was in Greek or Chinese or Arabic, it would come out in the transcription. But if it wasn't transcribed, I couldn't use it. So I didn't get every single book, but I got a lot in a lot of different languages. So the bibliography are actually other people's requests. So that's thinking about, how is knowledge made? All of this kind of genetic material of knowledge is there, and it's producing whatever they were making. So that was out of an ethnographic study of how scholars make scholarship, where I decidedly not to write about it in words because that was their medium, but to use, that artistic approach to actually displace what they were doing in order to help understand it better. So thinking about what is a bibliography, thinking about something like the other piece, Cappuccino. I did a whole series on caffeine. We could probably do that about artists too, right? or wine or something, whatever people use to help them work. But I noticed that, without either tea or coffee, there was nobody who was going to get anything done. So that's kind of a commentary, but I use their actual research projects. So you have, ornithologists, literary scholars, historians, sociologists. It's a whole group of people in different sciences who make up that cappuccino. And then I did write the names of coffee in all of their languages on top of that using coffee. So if you look at the piece, you will see words and they all just say coffee. And then the whole thing is painted with coffee, and also there's like embedded coffee grounds.
Ah, that's
Page
cool.
34, John.
Thank you. Oh. Oh, that's great. Okay. I'm going to move to a completely different direction here. Whether in this show or in your own lives, I think all four of you have talked about working in collaboration in interesting ways. And I wonder if we could talk about that. And maybe Cindy, because I've seen some of your collaborations happening on stage. I wonder if you could talk about how you work in collaboration, and is it an important part of your fiber art as well, or is it something that feeds your process, or is it a one-off?
Well, I'm hoping performance is not a one-off, John, but a collaboration that applies to this show, because there's a long piece that I made actually is in conversation with 3 poems from this book, Letters Under Rock. And this is in collaboration with Bori Thatch, who is a young man from Cambodia who came to America from a refugee camp when he was 4. And so being able to kind of work with, here I am, old enough to be his mother, and, my life experiences, but then also he's lived to me many lifetimes having to come to America, not knowing English, and, his family's Cambodian. So he's been through a lot in a short period of time in that regard. And we wrote letters back and forth. So just in response, but it started with artwork. He wrote a poem from one of my art costume pieces, and then we just kept going. But in the show, it's the pieces Relearn Being in the World, and it's 12 feet long. Also in the book, it's just a part of it.
Mm.
So this is a story. It's a narrative piece. It's collage. The fabrics come from all around the world. And again, I'd like to share a poem because Jean put the last line in the book, which is a wonderful line, Jean. But I thought it'd be fun because this poem doesn't appear in the book. And the collaboration came from responding. He might use words or ideas, especially from, his culture that were new to me, that I would bring in, and then it would be in the art. So I'm a wanderer and he's a nomad. And I think collaboration in the general question just enriches the experience, it multiplies beyond. And I made the costumes that both of us wear in the performance. And we're going to finally have a book launch in May that was supposed to happen 2 years ago at the end of March, 2 years ago. So we will be doing that soon. Dear Nomad, I am the white-lined sphinx moth with brown head and thorax, flight like a hummingbird. My body too large for its wings. A placid lake performing a moth ritual each morning before the night travelers sleep. They tell of a face in a mollusk shell who shares a story, a prayer written and burned, thanks the night for moon and stars that navigate my path. I bring healing to others, drink the moon's halo. At dusk, wildflowers speak of seeds blown to the sea. A young mother battles cancer for years, reborn. Her sister lives in the rocks by the ocean with her baby. They sit in the sand and rock to endless rhythm, a shadow song, safe, small. Nature is large. I want to feel small again. So I also, thank you, had this, poem under grief. I realized that all of the work in this show has to do with grieving. And that was one that really hit me, whether it's the tree or the bees, or, this mother passing, ancestors, trauma. So I didn't realize, which is one of the fun things about doing panels like this, that was such a prominent theme, because, you create work over a long time and you're focusing on each one. And I see Nancy shaking her head. It's like, yeah, I had these love letters, but then there's, later on I made this, and there was this story of a young man and, wrongfully accused. And so you go over time, but then when you look at these questions that you gave us, I could see some themes happening, and that was, I like that.
Interesting. The almost coming out of your subconscious things that you need to work through.
Yes, absolutely.
And Denise, I understand that you work in collaboration as well.
Yeah, in all sorts of different ways. I was privileged at the time I did defining, the dictionary project, because my intern that I had for a whole year grew up in the Philippines. And so she was just so amazingly talented with origami that she and I had so much fun, taking the obituary and deciding what form to make it in. And her mind was so sharp, she could take a piece of paper and figure out where the person's name from the obituary would then show on the object after she folded it all up. And it was so much fun that she taught me how to do this. And so I'm like, Jen, I made a kangaroo. And she's like making this incredible stuff. And we would do a prototype through and then do that. But it was just as much of her, looking at 12 different recipes on how to make a origami kangaroo. And then she'd do all of them. And then we decide, which one was the best design. And so that was really, really personal. Whereas with Unto Dust, it collaborates with everyone who wants to touch it and move it around. And the whole thing of, creating and co-creating the artwork to make your vision come true, to make your composition come true, was very important with this whole thing. That, people are worried about it. And I'm just like, I'm so happy that people are interacting with it and manipulating things the way they want. One fellow stacked them all on top of each other in this really tall gymnasium in Burbank. And that was really cool because it was like, how high can I get this? And other ones, Tommy Hollenstein did the whole thing with his assistant while he was in the wheelchair. And that was super cool because he's thinking it, she's doing it, it's doing its own thing. And then other people will come along and they'll just move like one piece or another piece. And then there's other pieces that from the get-go, I'm working together with someone just because it's so much more interesting to me to interact and have conversation and work together in collaboration than to just be locked up. And so the piece I'm doing now is inviting everyone worldwide to participate. And so there's 2,700 COVID prayer planes. And so I'm gathering them from wherever anybody will be willing to read the newspaper, write their concerns about COVID inside, seal it so I can't see it, and then mail it to me, or just, I've got piles of newspapers to give to people to fold and write. And that brings in the other thing about language is writing inside and sealing it so that I can't read it, so that they know what they wrote. I don't need to be able to read the language. And in a lot of ways, when I'm doing it, it's almost like I'm doing my signature. I'm just going through Greeking, but it's more of a signature type. My head's thinking, Lord, have mercy. All the things about worrying and prayers that I want to infuse into this thing, but I'm just gesturing because I know that that's what it means to me, no matter how I write it. It still means that, despite that it's not legible, because it's sealed. No one cares. No one will really know. And I learned that from Lynn Aldrich years ago. She was talking about a piece that she did where she had this floating balloon on this cylinder, this illuminated cylinder. And she looks at me and she goes, there's a secret inside there. I'm like, oh, okay. Now, naturally, we all want to say, so what's the secret? Well, it's a secret. So you can't ask what the secret is. And so that really infused in me the idea that there should be a mystery captured inside things. And sometimes that is in the written word or the printed word or a gesture.
That's it. So is the art more of the act as opposed to the product?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I think the art becomes this whole living organism on its own. That it evolves as I change and as time goes. Sorry, that's my golden retriever. And so, the art, I don't want to control it. I don't want to be fussy with it. I want it to organically take me in new directions. And I love mistakes.
That's great. Yeah. And Nancy,
Yes.
and you also work in collaboration in interesting ways.
Are you referring to the poem, the piece in there that has the poem?
I'm thinking about your work, not necessarily here, but with people in different homes.
Oh, sure. There's a company called Art and Creativity for Healing that's been around for 25 years, and I've been with them since the beginning. And we do workshops for people, and there is a curriculum that you follow, but it's basically asking them questions and they answer them in colors and shapes. And we found that going abstract makes it much easier for everybody. It really loosens them up. And so we don't let them draw or have any recognizable imagery. And we do it with survivors of sexual assault. We do it with wounded warriors down on the naval base. And it's been really interesting how it actually brings out so much. And it's like, it sets you, by doing the art, it kind of pulls part of your brain away from all the feeling so you can express it. You know, if you're too deep in the feeling, you won't be able to do anything. But by having that activity, it allows you to access those feelings. I worked at Children's Hospital for 10 years with the kids, and there was this product called Model Magic, and I use that a lot. And you'd walk into a room and there's the child sitting on the bed and the parents sitting in the chairs, and they're just scared to death and nobody's talking. And so you break off, it's an air dry modeling clay, and it feels kind of like marshmallow. So I'd give everybody a piece of that and then just start talking. And pretty soon everybody is kind of giggling and making whatever they want to make. And it's amazing how good all of these, there were a lot of Hispanic patients, and the husbands or the fathers were so good with their hands. I mean, they were just crafting animals and all kinds of crazy things, but it feels good and it's just soothing to the touch. But just having something that they were busy doing allowed everybody to just relax, and pretty soon then they're talking and the tension just dissipates. It was really wonderful to watch. It was really fun.
Has to have influenced your art as well, I'm guessing.
I think it does, yeah. And a lot of times I'll work on a painting and I don't know what it's going to be. I mean, I would rather not. With portraits, if I'm doing it for somebody, obviously it has to be that person. But a lot of my portraits, you know, I'm just trying to get some sort of a feeling out of it, or my abstracts. It's like, I'm not sure where I'm going, and I just keep working and keep working. And sometimes I go back in the next morning and see it, and I know what it is, you know, and I didn't necessarily know that going in. And it's a wonderful way to work. You know, you get out all of this stuff that you don't necessarily even know is still in there. Yeah.
That's great. And Susan, I'm absolutely, you know, every English major has thought about being a cultural anthropologist. It's part of what we do. Yeah, every single one of us. And I didn't want to, one of the reasons I didn't want to do it is the traditional ethnography, yes. And I love the way that you described constructing as part of you're a collaborator.
Yes, I do a lot of collaboration. The pieces that I have here, like I said, there was this study I did with scholars, so they were kind of my subjects, but also collaborators. They didn't make any of the art. But I actually have a show up right now at Gallery 825, you know, the Los Angeles Art Association, that shows some works that were the beginning of a big collaboration here in the Inland Empire, and Cindy was a part of that. And that was one that we did for about 4 years, that started with my own paintings and my own ethnography about hanging laundry on the line. And then we had, you know, one thing led to another, but a lot of it was using sort of ethnographic fieldwork techniques to think about, well, how do you bring people together? What is a way to get people to do things they've never done before? How can you bring people together to, you know, if you're not just if you're a painter, let's try making a sculpture, but if you're a dancer, how would you work with a poet or a painter? So these kinds of things came into that project, and that lasted, I mean, we had about 100 people by the end. So it started off with, you know, me and my art and a show, which I then handed over to other artists and a mixture of artists and scholars to remake. And then that led to research about clotheslines. And then that led to going to a mall, University Village Mall in Riverside, where there was an empty storefront, which we turned into a gallery / performance space. And then we worked in collaboration with the Riverside Public Libraries and chose 3 libraries where we had these like one-day extravaganzas, I don't know, half circus, half performance, half exhibition. And we had 100 people being a part of this, and these huge sculptures that would come in on trucks, and it was quite a big collaboration. And then I have an ongoing project, which is called the Moving Matters Traveling Workshop, that is about, it's a group of artists who are all migrants from, who we've all lived in different countries. And this one has been going since 2013. And we do site-specific art in different places, sort of imitating our individual migrations to several countries, but we do it together. So it's this collaborative, projective sort of experiment where we then reflect on our experiences, and there's lots of stories, of course, involved in that, but lots of art production. And so not all of my work is within those projects, but certainly those come back just, like others were saying, you're doing that collaborative work and all of a sudden, oh yes, I can do, new things, even in terms of the techniques that I would use. Have certainly been influenced by that collaboration, or at least that collective background.
Yeah, I've got one more general question that I can ask, but I want to open it up for anybody who'd like to bring their own questions first. So did this spark anybody's curiosity? Does anybody, would anybody like to follow up with a question?
I've got a question for Cindy. There was a dress in the show.
Yes.
Yes, and now is that a dress that you wear? I mean, have you worn this? Is it
Page
actual
26.
apparel for you?
So this dress is actually the first piece I made, I would say, from scratch. So usually my costumes that I wear, I'm using, oh, this one. Sorry, I thought you meant the wall piece. I can wear this. I have two pieces in the show. One's on the wall, one's on a stand. Okay, so this piece, the base was given to me. So that's the blue and the yellow stitching at the top.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what ethnicity this is because people give me things and I don't always know them. And but what I do is it's beautiful handwork. So women's work is very important in my work. I don't cover that up, but I collage around everywhere else in the garment. And I'm using here pieces from old scarves of mine, old shirts, dresses. I've got Nigerian lace in here. The bees, this is about the bees because when I was making this piece, the bees, were dying off and there was an alarm. We have to have the bees. So this is about Moon Knows About the Bees. So I can wear this. I haven't performed in it yet. This is a newer piece, but most of the pieces I make, I can wear. There's a couple that are way too small, but I just love the base garment so much that I have to make a sculpture out of it. But I would say 90+% of the time I can wear them.
Great.
And I like, so I purposely, there's always things on them that can move. You can see the pieces that come down, that sway and move, because I'm going to wear these and move around. And that's the three-dimensional, is another aspect of my work. And so this was the piece I thought you were asking about. This was created for the wall, but I do have a simple back to it. It's not meant to be worn. I had this in another show and this woman wanted to buy it for her daughter. And I wasn't there when that question was raised. And I thought, oh my goodness, she can't put that on. And that's a pretty expensive dress, but why not? But anyway, this is more collaged pieces from various garments, several from my daughter that I have permission to cut up. The other night I was talking to someone, I mentioned that I use my daughter's clothes and they look terrified. And I'm like, no, these are hand-me-downs that she gives me that I can cut them up. I'm not taking them off her body or out of her closet, and cutting them up. So this is a little different approach and is meant to be on the wall. In this case, the back doesn't have a lot to it because it was meant, for the front part and the wall to happen. And so usually I have a base. This time I created it from scratch. And again, fabrics from around the world, from Japan and different places. And the V, someone gave me from costuming. I had it for years. and it fit on this dress, and I had to hand sew that on because those are beads on there. So they weren't going to go into the sewing machine.
Mm.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
Oh, thank
beautiful.
you.
That is great. Well, that to me seems like a really wonderful place to wrap up the evening. So thank you all so much for being part of the show, and thank you for having this conversation with us.
Oh, it was fun.
Thank you,
Let's do it again.
John.
Nice to
Thank
meet you
you.
all in person,
Thank
in
you
sort
all.
of person.
Thank you.
Yeah, sort of in person. And thank you, Jean and John, for having us.
Yes.
You guys are the
Fabulous
ones that made the
exhibit.
exhibit, so.
Well, nice to see everyone and the faces. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, nice to finally be able to meet you, even if it's this way.
And it's
Ditto.
also nice
Ditto.
to have such a beautiful catalog. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Yes, it looks wonderful.